Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Christine Shin, Dean of the School of International Service, or SIS, at American University. Today's event, commemorating the 120th anniversary of the Nobel Peace Prize, is co-sponsored by SIS and our colleagues in the AU Office for Global and Immersive Studies. It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest as well as our moderator. Nadia Murad, the current student at AU, is a human rights activist and recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 for her efforts to end the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. Her New York Times bestselling memoir, The Last Girl, My Story of Captivity and My Fight Against the Islamic State, is a harrowing account of the genocide against the Yazidi people of Iraq and Nadia's imprisonment by the so-called Islamic State, or ISIS. In 2016, Nadia became the first United Nations Goodwill Ambassador for the dignity of survivors of human trafficking. That year, she was also awarded the Council of Europe Václav Havel Award for Human Rights and the Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought. She won the Nobel Peace Prize with Dr. Denis Mukwege, and together they founded the Global Fund for Survivors of Conflict-Related Sexual Violence. In 2019, Nadia was appointed as the UN Sustainable Development Goals Advocate. Nadia is the founder and president of Nadias Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to rebuilding communities in crises and to advocating for survivors of sexual violence. Nadia's initiative is currently focused on the sustainable redevelopment of the Yazidi homeland in Sinjar, as well as pursuing holistic justice for survivors of ISIS atrocities. Nadia, thank you so very much for sharing with our AU community your experience and the impact of the Nobel Peace Prize on your work. Our moderator, Tazreena Sajjad, is a professor here at SIS in the Global Governance, Politics and Security program. She specializes in transitional justice, refugees and forced displacement, post-conflict governance, and gender and conflict. Her current research projects include examining the role of fortifications against irregular migrant flows and refugee reception in the Global South. Dr. Sajjad is the author of Transitional Justice in South Asia, a study of Afghanistan and Nepal, as well as numerous articles and reports. Previously, she worked in the Afghanistan program at the Global Rights in Afghanistan, as well as in the South Asia program at the National Democratic Institute. She's also served as a research consultant at the Afghanistan Research and Evaluation Unit in Kabul, Afghanistan, the International Foundation for Electoral Systems in DC, and the Berghoff Foundation in Berlin, Germany. She currently serves as an advisor to the Refugee Solidarity Network. Dr. Sajjad is also the 2020 recipient of the SIS William Cromwell Outstanding Teaching Award. Taz, thank you for moderating our discussion today, and I will now pass the mic on to you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dean Chin, for the welcoming remarks, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today for a conversation with Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Nadia Murad, on this very sunny fall afternoon at American University in Washington, D.C. Before we begin our conversation, we ask that no one record this session. We will be recording this webinar and it will be available on the SIS YouTube channel. This event will be live captioned. Nadia, thank you so much for joining us. We know you're extremely busy and we are really grateful to you for sharing your insights, your experience, and your analysis about the work that you've been doing with regard to sexual violence and sexual violence survivors in the context of Sinjar, as well as your advocacy for women and girls in the context of conflict. Could you today share with the audience your motivations for establishing Nadias Initiative and your vision for the organization?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I started Nadia's Initiative because I wanted to be able to create sustainable solutions for my community's recovery. The majority of the Yazidi community is still displaced in camps, only a few hours away from their homes. They are unable to return because Sinjar's basic infrastructure, clean water, roads, schools, houses, and hospitals were destroyed. Most international funding goes toward displacement camps. But I realized that this is not sustainable. Living in camps does not help my community heal from trauma or rebuild their lives. And 1 hour of craft training will not empower women to recover from genocide and sexual violence when they still live in a tent without privacy, education, or even job opportunities. For many, moving forward will only be possible in their homeland and with proper access to education, livelihoods, and healthcare. I founded Nadias Initiative to fight conflict-related sexual violence, to advocate for gender equality.
Thank you for sharing the background in terms of why you established Nadia's initiative. Nadia, could you tell us a little more about specific achievements that have been made by your initiative and the particular kinds of work that you are particularly inspired by?
You know, I'm proud of like everything we have done so far, but I'm very proud of our program that supports women to restore farms and start agriculture businesses. Growing up, I worked on my family's farm with my mother, sisters, and brothers. It was difficult work, but I loved being so deeply connected with our land. I also saw how difficult it was for my mother to make a living and support our family without enough resources. So it's really meaningful to me that the initiative is supporting women like my mom who work the land as the head of their families. I think she would be proud to see that we are helping women reconnect with the land in Sinjar and grow something beautiful for our community.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love the fact that you spoke about the personal connection with the land and the importance of nurturing it, even after the ravages of war. You talked about some of the really important inspirational developments that have been put into place as a result of your work. Could you speak a little bit to the audience about some of the main challenges you've faced, particularly when you have centered women and girls from Sinjar in the work that you do?
Yeah, you know, working with populations affected by sexual violence is so important, but it's challenging. We have had to develop many measures to ensure that when we consult survivors about reparations, for example, it does not re-traumatize them. That is part of the reason why we developed the Murad Code, which will be a guide for best practices when working with survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. It is our duty to support women and survivors, but we have to make sure we are helping in a way that does more good than harm.
Thank you. And I really appreciated you focusing on the fact that it's the survivors whose needs and whose demands need to be centered in any kind of post conflict initiative. I want to learn a little more about, Nadia, how you envision the question of justice, given that the people of Sinjar and the Yazidi community have been targeted for genocide and crimes against humanity and war crimes. Could you speak to the question of justice? What does it actually mean for you, for the women and girls in Sinjar, and then in terms of the work of justice that Nadia's initiative encompasses?
First of all, for me and for all survivors in the Yazidi community, justice has to start with rescuing the 2,800 Yazidi women and children who are still in ISIS captivity. We cannot achieve justice until the atrocities has ended. The genocide continues as long as women and children are still enslaved. Apart from that, Nadia's Initiative and Yazidi activists are striving for holistic and reparative justice. This means holding ISIS accountable for genocide and sexual violence, not just terrorism. Perpetrators should be prosecuted in national and international courts because these acts classify as war crimes and crimes against humanity. Justice also means providing reparations for survivors and facilitating dignified burials for the victims of genocide who lay in mass graves.
Thank you. I think this is really important because a lot of the times when we think about justice, we may not necessarily understand that the question of justice is not just obviously about the courts. It is about something much bigger than that. And the process of reconciliation doesn't begin until and unless all these demands for justice is met. Nadia, I want to now shift our focus to some of the challenges and some of the misconceptions that exist with regard to women and girls who have been displaced. What have been your experience with regard to your work with the women and girls displaced from Sinjar in terms of how the world understands or sort of misunderstands rather the experiences and the challenges facing displaced populations? And second, about these communities in the post-conflict period.
You know, it can be challenging to acknowledge that women and girls are especially vulnerable during conflict, while also respecting their power and agency. We need to do more to protect the rights and safety of women and girls, especially from conflict-related sexual violence. But we should never think that they are weak or helpless. It is this kind of thinking that justifies misogyny. Women and girls have a really important role to play in post-conflict peace building and development. They have so much to contribute to our societies, but they are only empowered to do so if their basic rights are respected.
Could you expand a little bit more about your work on anti-human trafficking that you have been doing and the focus with regard to anti-human trafficking in the context of Sinjar?
You know, we are working with governments from all over the world. We are working with United Nations, with NGOs. We have like lawyers. We work with survivors on the ground in Sinjar and in other places to make sure that we have like all the evidence. So for example, there are thousands of Yazidi survivors who have testified about their personal experience like me. And they do that because they want to they want for the world to hold the ISIS accountable, to make sure that what happened to them would not happen to women like in Afghanistan or in Africa or other places. So it's so important to work with survivors directly and to hear their like the message from them, what they want, what justice means to them. And at that point, you can then make sure like what is the right like the right work to do in order to prevent the sexual violence and in conflict and in Iraq or like against Yazidis or any other places. So including like consulting survivors, it's so important. Listening to them and in a way that not harm them, just to make sure that what they want, what justice means to them, and how we can help them.
Thank you. Again, the emphasis on listening to the survivors' voices and the agency that they have is so important in post-conflict work. I wanted to ask a little more, Nadia, about you've elaborated quite a bit on the work that is being done in Sinjar. What are the other issues that perhaps in your analysis is not being done or require more attention in the context of rebuilding Sinjar?
I think there is a lot to be done in Sinjar. As I said, there are still about 2,800 Yazidis still missing in captivity, including my niece, my nephew, my sister-in-law. In Syria or in Iraq, we don't know still where they are. We are talking about 2,800 human beings that their families have been waited in the past 7 years for them to be rescued. And unfortunately, there was no effort from anybody to help them and their families to make sure that those women and children will be back. We still have tens of mass graves that have not been, they need to be opened, that the evidence needs to be like the bodies on these mass graves needs to be identified. People are thousands of the Yazidi like families, they are waiting for a dignified burial for their loved ones that they lost during the ISIS attack. Schools are still destroyed. The security in Sinjar, it's not stable yet as the other places in Iraq, and the people are still like almost half of the population are still displaced inside their own country, only a few hours away from Sinjar. And I think the international community, the United Nations, we should do more for the survivors, for the community to go back. And it's been 7 years that this genocide, it's an ongoing process for the community, and they have not recovered yet. They are still, there is a huge needs that we must help them, especially women and children, girls, that they survived ISIS captivity. They need support, they need healthcare support, they need education, a safe shelter, they need to feel safe and respect.
Thank you. And Nadia, I just wanted to acknowledge, thank you for sharing something so personal and so deeply painful for you in order to sort of emphasize the fact that these personal losses are the driving reason why you do the work that you do. And it is important and it is absolutely essential that no matter what support system and structure is created by the international community, it is again the voices of survivors and the ones who are missing and who are lost and who have suffered who need to be the center of the conversation always, and the driving force for the work of peace building. I wanted to ask you, in terms of the support that you've been receiving with Nadia's initiative, can you give our audience a sense of the best practices, that have really enabled you to do the work that you're doing? Some examples of best practices that you can think of?
You know, I'm grateful for all the support that Nadias Initiative has so far received from governments, NGOs, from people, universities, and even like volunteers that they will come and do this work. And I can't say that there is like a specific country or like NGOs that they are supporting the most, but there are like, for example, we are building a new hospital with the French government with the support of President Macron to build a new hospital in Sinjar for everyone. We had only one hospital before 2014, and when ISIS attacked Sinjar, they destroyed that only hospital. So healthcare is so important for the recovery of survivors and for women and children. So we are now rebuilding that, building a new hospital for the community and for like other communities, not the Yazidi, but we have other communities in Sinjar. And as I said, the farming with like money from the support of some governments like Germany, Taiwan, we have been able to rebuild and build hundreds of farms. And that family, that, like, for example, I say, like my personal experience, my family, we were working on a farm. The whole family will like find a job in that farm, and it helps the family to make a living, a dignified living, and to make them busy. So USAID are like, they're being so supportive to the like all the projects in Sinjar. They are rebuilding schools with us from like in the past 4-5 years. They have been with us in Sinjar, and they moved all their like projects to Sinjar with Nadias Initiative, rebuilding schools, roads, and helping women and children. So I'm grateful to everyone that in Sinjar was not, when I started doing this work with like Nadias Initiative work, there were only like few thousand people returned back, and governments, NGOs, they were like, it's dangerous to go work in Sinjar, and we made it easy, you know, with the support of those like governments, and they made it easy for us to go and work and tell the world that we cannot let ISIS to achieve their goals. Yazidis, they deserve to go back. Sinjar, they deserve to the basic services, they deserve justice, and we are doing this by the support of so many like good allies.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's important for us to recognize how good partnerships and alliances can be instrumental for sustainable peace building projects. There's a lot of questions coming in, Nadia. I just wanted to shift our attention to talking a little bit about the Nobel Peace Prize, because obviously this is a conversation about on the 120th anniversary of the honor. How has the Nobel Peace Prize been supportive of the work that you do? Could you talk a little bit about what it has been like after receiving the Peace Prize, and what and how you've been able to navigate the level of exposure that it has brought about for in your life?
Yeah, you know, to be honest, when I found out that I had been awarded the Nobel, I felt like the prize came with expectations that I would be able to solve all of these issues, like solve them on my own with the prize. But the great thing about the Nobel is that it has provided a platform for me to connect with so many people who have incredible knowledge, passion, and influence to advance our joint causes, to combat the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war, we need an army not of soldiers, but of activists, leaders, and change makers. I am grateful that the Nobel has allowed me to connect with so many allies.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Could you let us know, Nadia, in terms of what are some of the issues and realities that give you hope? Because this is extremely difficult work that you are doing. This is your commitment to advocate for women and girls in crisis and conflict and their experiences. So, what inspires you every day to do the work that you're doing?
You know what? When I need to renew my hope, I try to zero in on a smaller scale. Organizations, activists, and individuals at the grassroots are making incredible strides against all odds. Personally, I am inspired by my sisters-in-law and the memory of my mom. They have never given up trying to provide a better life for their families and those who are around them. So neither can I.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing again something very, very personal and dear to you. And I know it's extremely hard to talk about that. Um, uh, could you, just a general conversation? I mean, you're spending so much of your energy and your time and your emotions, using the platform that has been thrust onto you to raise awareness about the people of Sinjar, about sexual violence, that was inflicted upon women and girls in the Yazidi community. Could you give the audience a sense of, where to from here? What can they do? What can they be a part of to support you and the work that individuals and peace builders like you can do in the world outside?
You know, the problems my community is facing, like injustice, gender-based violence, climate change, are unfortunately universal.
Mhm.
And they are not going away until we address the root causes. Yazidis have been persecuted over and over again throughout recent history, and yet nothing was done to safeguard our community against ISIS. We should not wait for genocide or any other atrocities to occur before we join forces to tackle these systematic issues. I think we will be able to solve these issues if we can learn more about each other as human beings. Before today, many of you may not have heard of the Yazidis, or maybe you only know about ISIS, like about ISIS genocides and crimes against humanity. Like many minorities, my community's story is rich and complex, but often erased from history. There is more to the Middle East than oil and war. There are people just like you who want to build a better world. In your studies, I hope you will all seek to understand how common and marginalized people are affected. I believe this understanding will be a bridge to collaboration and changes.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I think it's so powerful that you use the term Middle East is more than a place, a region of oil and war. And I think the understanding that a lot of people have is that the complexity and the history and the richness of the Middle East sometimes most often gets lost in the depictions of the Middle East, or the way that we understand issues of conflict and struggle. That of course exists, but so do a lot of different other realities. And I think that recognizing that complexity and recognizing the humanity of people who live in the Middle East in the multiple countries that exist is really, really important. And recognition of the rights of marginalized populations everywhere. Do you have any last minute thoughts that you want to share with the audience? Some parting words that you want your audience to know and learn about the people of Sinjar, the women and girls of Sinjar, about displacement and the experiences of women and girls, so that, you know, the conversation can continue, because you will do the work and you'll continue to do the work, but so that the audience also look for not just inspiration, but also ways in which they can think about these issues in much more complicated ways.
You know, thank you so much for everyone who listening. And I think in one conversation, 1 hour, you cannot explain a genocide and all that the community have been through, and it's still continuing. Like we said, the people that are missing, the displacement people. I hope that you can educate yourself more about the Yazidi and what ISIS did to them, and why they have been like so vulnerable for like generations in Iraq. And I hope that you can read my book, The Last Girl, which explains everything about the genocide, about the Yazidi culture, the religion, and that everything. Like one, like for a new one who want to like learn more about the community, it's so important, you know, to look more, to read about it, to listen to more like survivors, they read books and documentaries, things. This is a genocide. It's been ongoing in the past 7 years, and it's hard to explain it in one talk and one Zoom call. So hopefully next time we can do it in person, and that you could tell me how you can help survivors of sexual violence, not just Yazidis, but women and girls in general. They need our support. They need us to address and raise awareness of like these issues.
Thank you so much, Nadia. I so appreciate the fact that you centered the voices of women and girls of Sinjar, of the Yazidi women and girls, and the Yazidi community that have suffered so much in the hands of ISIS. And as you rightly pointed out, suffered not just during the times of ISIS, which has been the most recent development in terms of political persecution of a community because of their marginalized identity, but also throughout history. I appreciated the fact that you encouraged our audience to think more, learn more about the Middle East and the complexities of the Middle East, about the history and the culture and the society of the Yazidi community, and always to remember that women and girls who are targeted for rape and sexual violence in the context of war are not just victims, they are agents, and they have agency, and that their voices and their concerns, their demands and their skills should be centered in the work of peace building, and that the question of justice is more than just about accountability, which is very important, but also about seeking ways in which families can be reunited, families can be found, loved ones, the memories of loved ones can be brought to the ones who are still living, and to create a path forward in terms of rebuilding a relationship with the land, rebuilding a relationship with the community, and for broader understandings of security and peace, rather than the very narrowed understanding of peace and security that we normally hold. So thank you, Nadia. Thank you for the incredible work that you do, for your tireless patience, and for your phenomenal leadership. and the platform that you have been using to raise the voices and concerns of the Yazidi people and for women and girls in the context of war and conflict. Thank you so much for your inspiration and for your hard work. I thank the audience today for your time and and your patience with attending this event. And I encourage the audience to visit the Nadias Initiative website to learn more and to follow Nadia and her organization on social media to learn about the incredible work that Nadias Initiative is doing and continues to do with regard to the Yazidi community in Iraq. We would now like to share a 5-minute video from Nadia's initiative. We hope you will stay to watch, and we hope you can join us for another SIS event next Tuesday. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.
More than 60% of the Yazidi community is displaced. Our homeland is destroyed. ISIS came not just for 1 or 2 days. ISIS left behind a community that will not recover without the support of international community. Thinking about my mother, my brothers, and the thousands of Yazidi who have their remains in mass graves without a respectful and dignified burial. It's painful for me as a survivor, but living without receiving justice is another kind of torture. Survivors and victims of ISIS deserve justice, not empty promises of hope. ISIS members need to be held accountable in open courts, and victims who remain in captivity need to be brought home and have the opportunity to rebuild their lives. We know there is violence against women. We should not wait until thousands of Yazidi women are subjected to sexual slavery to make change. We know by now that when we invest in women and allow women to take part in policy development and leadership, it creates positive and lasting change. Now is the time for us to come together and show that through collective action we can face this pandemic as one global community committed to uplifting women, children, and marginalized people. That is why today I ask you to not remain silent about the things that matter most to you or things that have happened to you. You can work to make a change, and the world needs that change.